Welcome to the channel. I have an interesting story for you. There are places on the map of the world that seem not to belong to the living. Eilean Mor, an island off the coast of Scotland, is one of them. This small patch of land, battered by the roaring Atlantic, has become the symbol of one of the most chilling and inexplicable mysteries. The wind seemed to never cease over the northern seas. Gray waves, heavy as lead, rushed toward the shores, crashing against black cliffs in 1,000 white spears. And it was here, amid the silent and merciless ocean, that a new lighthouse rose, the pride of the Northern Lighthouse Board, a guardian meant to protect the lives of sailors. Eilean Mor is the largest of the 7 Flannan Isles, but even it is just a bare rock jutting out of the sea. From the shores of the highlands, fishermen said that no one ever stays on those islands after sunset. Livestock was sometimes herded there to graze on small patches of green, but spending the night was thought to bring great misfortune. The old folk whispered that shadows lived on the island. They did not walk by day. Since ancient times, people had avoided the island. Fishermen along the Scottish coast said that spending the night on the Flannans was like being a guest among the dead. Sheep were taken there to graze because the grass on the rocky soil was unusually lush. But as soon as the sun began to set, shepherds would hastily gather the animals, and the final glance at the dark cliffs was always accompanied by the sign of the cross. The island was considered cursed. People said that on stormy nights, strange lights were seen above the cliffs, unlike torches or ship lanterns. The light would flicker, then flash suddenly, and always vanish into the darkness. Some claimed they weren't lights at all, but the eyes of giants sleeping deep within the rock, who occasionally opened their eyelids. When the Northern Lighthouse Board decided to build a lighthouse, the decision caused confusion and even fear. For 4 years, craftsmen and laborers fought the sea as they ferried stone and metal in fragile boats. Strange things happened, ropes snapped for no reason, tools vanished, and once an entire shipment of timber meant for interior work disappeared during a storm, as if the wind had lifted it and carried it into the abyss. Old sailors shook their heads. You shouldn't anger the island's guardians. And yet, the lighthouse was built. A white tower rose above the cliff, and its light was meant to save thousands of lives. But it was here that one of the most terrifying mysteries of the 20th century unfolded. Archived records mention that during the construction of the lighthouse, workers heard singing. It came from the cracks in the rocks, especially at night. The sounds resembled a choir, sometimes children's voices, sometimes women's. Several men went mad, insisting that someone was calling their name. One worker threw himself into the ocean straight from the cliff, and his body was never found. At the end of the 19th century, the lighthouse on Eilean Mor seemed like a symbol of hope. A solitary tower standing at the edge of a cliff, cutting through darkness and fog with its cold light, guiding ships through the merciless waters of the North Atlantic. But with the light of the lighthouse, a shadow was born as well, the ancient fear of sailors who had always avoided these rocks. People said the island was deserted not because of its remoteness, but because it was guarded by something other than men. Fishermen whispered that on stormy nights strange lights rose above the hills, like torches, though no human had ever set foot there. Others claimed the rocks whispered, and if you listened too long, you might lose your mind. Thomas Marshall, James Duckett, and Donald MacArthur knew these stories. But like all lighthouse keepers, they were used to superstition. For them, duty came first, and duty demanded discipline. But December of 1900 brought more to the island than icy wind and storms. At dawn on the 12th, Thomas wrote in the logbook, strong westerly wind. Waves breaking high above the cliffs. Feels strange, as if there is a presence in the air. He didn't elaborate that, during the night, he thought the lighthouse beam had caught glimpses of figures standing on the cliff tops. They stood motionless until darkness swallowed them again. On the 13th, Duckett noted, the wind howls like a living thing. Voices heard, as if someone is calling from the sea. Donald laughed at this, but didn't sleep that night. He swore he heard heavy footsteps outside the lighthouse door, though no one was there. On the 14th, the storm grew stronger. The final, chilling entry appeared in the logbook: the sea, the fury of the storm, prayers. May God watch over us. After that, silence. When a relief team arrived days later, the lighthouse was empty. The door was closed, everything inside in order, dishes cleaned, lamps filled with oil, only the clocks had stopped. The clothes of 2 keepers were gone, but one set still hung in place, as if the third man had left in a hurry. On the western side of the island, the waves had torn away chunks of land, twisted metal, and overturned boulders. But there were no bodies. They had simply vanished. Locals insisted that on that night, a strange glow was seen on the horizon, as if the sea itself was burning with green fire. The elders said it was a sign that the Fae had taken the men into their world. Others claimed that something had risen from the depths during the storm, something as old as the ocean itself. Some believed the men had gone mad and thrown themselves into the storm. But fishermen swore that if you looked closely into the mist around the lighthouse, you could see 3 figures standing at the edge of the cliff. As if they were waiting. Whispering words carried away by the wind. After that, the pages remained blank. When the rotation vessel arrived on the island a few days later, the lighthouse greeted it with dead silence. Inside, everything looked as though the keepers had just risen from the table, dishes were clean, lamps filled, beds made. But the clocks had stopped. On the western cliff, the storm had torn stones from their roots, ripped iron railings off, and overturned massive boulders. But there was no trace of bodies, not a single drop of blood. Only one chilling clue remained in the common room. Carved into the wall near the window was a symbol, a circle crossed with lines, resembling an eye. None of the sailors recognized it. Later, fishermen swore that on those nights they saw a strange glow on the horizon, not the green shimmer of the northern lights, but a fire rising from below, from the depths of the sea. As if the ocean floor itself had opened, and the sky reflected someone's gaze. People began to whisper that the 3 keepers didn't drown, they were called. Taken by forces older than the Christian God, the true masters of these cliffs. Since then, some claim that if you approach Eilean Moor during calm weather, you can still hear fragments of prayers carried by the wind. As if 3 voices still stand at the edge of the cliff, pleading to be released. Historians say that in December 1900, 3 lighthouse keepers vanished without a trace. Official reports blame a severe storm. But those who have ever neared these cliffs are certain, the truth is far more terrifying. Since the disappearance of the 3 keepers, the island has become a shadow of itself. Fishermen said that when a boat came too close to the rocks of Eilean Moor, the waves would behave strangely. It felt like the water pulled the vessel toward the shore, and on the cliff, a figure in a long cloak would appear. It didn't move or wave, it just watched. Those who saw it couldn't sleep for weeks. Ever since, people said, the lighthouse stands on cursed ground. What happened next, no one knows, but the rumors persist. Some say the men heard a call, like a human cry for help. They went to shore, thinking a boat was sinking. But something else awaited them. A tall figure stood upon the waves, cloaked, its face hidden, but its hands long and thin, like the roots of a tree. As the keepers approached, the water rose in a wall of spray, and the figure vanished into the foam. They were never seen again. Others claimed that on that night, the lighthouse shone with an unnatural light. Not yellow and warm, but greenish-white, as if a foreign fire burned within the lamp. Fishermen insisted this light did not guide ships, it lured them toward the rocks. The most chilling version is the one whispered about the ancient master of the sea. The elders said that Eilean Moor was once a place of sacrifice. People offered 3 men to the ocean so it would not raise its storms. And if the sacrifice was not made, the sea would come to claim its own. That is why 3 keepers vanished. Not 1. Not 2. But 3. Local fishermen swore that sometimes, on the eve of Christmas, in the deepest part of the night, 3 silhouettes could be seen in the windows of the lighthouse. They stood side by side, as if still keeping watch, but their eyes glowed with the dull, cold light of the sea. When engineers arrived for routine maintenance, some complained of nightmares. One claimed he dreamt of 3 wet, pale men standing at the foot of his bed, whispering, "This is our place, but your time will come soon." The sea at the base of Eilean Moor still rumbles with a strange, grim rhythm. The waves crash as if in time with an invisible heart. And if you stay there overnight, you may hear the wind carry voices calling your name, begging you to step out into the darkness. But no one has ever returned after answering that call. 3 young men, thrill seekers, investigators of the paranormal, decided to visit the island. Inspired by the legends, they made a deal with reluctant local fishermen to be taken there. The old sailor who ferried them across kept repeating that they shouldn't land. "It's dangerous," he said. But the boys only laughed, thinking it was just another spooky story for tourists. They entered the lighthouse and found it exactly as described in the old chronicles, silent, damp, echoing with the groan of rusted metal. Inside were new mechanisms with blinking lights, yet the place felt frozen in time. Their cameras were rolling, recording every step. They chose to spend the first night in the keeper's quarters. That's when it began. At first, there were strange noises. A scraping, like nails against metal. Then came knocking on the door, though they were the only people on the island. When they checked, there was nothing outside. Just the wind. On the second day, one of them, Tom, woke up screaming. He said he had dreamt of 3 men in old storm gear. Their faces were pale, their eyes fixed on him, unblinking. One of them whispered that Tom was sleeping in his bed. The camera by his bunk captured something terrifying. At exactly 3 a.m., the lens recorded 3 shadows, figures standing still by the wall. The group decided to explore the western slope of the island, the same place where storm damage had been discovered a century ago. Among the rocks, they found the remains of an old crate and twisted iron railings. It looked as though the storm had struck only hours earlier. But the worst part, in the stone were 3 deep footprints, bare, wet, as if left only minutes before. That evening, one of them, Michael, disappeared. He had gone down to the shore with his camera, and never came back. On the footage retrieved from his device, the final moments show a massive wave rising in front of him, and then a dark figure emerging from the sea. His friends searched for him all night but found only the camera and footprints leading toward the edge of the cliff. At dawn, the two remaining men decided to leave the island immediately. But the boat that had brought them was gone. The fishermen had left the previous evening, unwilling to spend a night near the shores of Eilean Moor. And as the sun rose, they heard footsteps on the lighthouse stairs, slow, heavy footsteps. They hid in the control room, but the door slowly began to open by itself. On the camera later recovered by rescue teams, the final recording was nearly unintelligible: the scream of the wind, shouting voices, and three figures approaching the lens. The camera fell, and the recording cut off. On the island, only one tent was found, along with a tripod and scattered belongings. No sign of the men. Since then, locals say that Eilean Moor has claimed its due once more. 3 in 100 years, far too few for the sea. It always demands more. They say the ocean has a memory. It doesn't forget those who challenge it. And Eilean Moor is not just a rock in the middle of the Atlantic, it's a living sentinel, hungry and malevolent, that has waited centuries for new souls. There is another legend, even more terrifying. One old man swore that in December of that same year, he was walking along the shore of a nearby island when he saw a strange light over the sea. At first, he thought it was the lighthouse beam. But then he realized the light was moving. Rising from the water, as if something was ascending. A vast, shapeless mass, with tendrils or limbs reaching out from it. The old man swore he saw, deep within that glow, 3 human silhouettes. Distorted, elongated, as if they were part of the thing emerging from the abyss. Today, the lighthouse is automated. No one lives there anymore. But sometimes, maintenance engineers report finding fresh footprints on the rocks, always barefoot, always 3 pairs. And everyone who has ever visited Eilean Moor says the same thing. The most terrifying thing there is the silence. It is so deep you can hear your own heartbeat.